A few days ago, I penned an irritated tweet. I've essentially been banned from Twitter as a consequence. I say banned, although technically I have been suspended.
Do you know why Jordan Peterson's critiques of woke culture have resonated with millions worldwide? In a time when freedom of speech feels increasingly restricted, Peterson boldly challenges the mainstream narrative, defending individual responsibility and the dangers of collective identity. His arguments aren't just about politics. They touch on the very core of human nature and our need for meaningful dialogue. As he calls out the flaws in woke ideology, Peterson forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about modern society. But are we losing the ability to think critically? And how much of our freedom are we willing to sacrifice?
Pride in, and so what I said was merely a fact. Next phrase to interrogate. And Ellen Page. Now, why did I stop there? Because in all likelihood, it was this seemingly innocuous phrase, including the name of a well-known actress. There, I'm in trouble again.
A few days ago, Jordan Peterson retweeted an annoyed tweet and got banned from using Twitter. As June has long turned into Pride Month and gender questions have framed cultural concerns, Peterson's tweet, which stated, "Elliot Page is a man," regarding the trans man actor formerly known as Ellen Page, caused an outrage. Peterson was challenged to scrub his tweet, and after his unyielding response, the debate over free speech, postmodern, progressive multiculturalism, and cultural Marxist harassment raged on. How could one simple tweet create such a big stir? But what does it tell me about the condition of the modern world? Peterson is a clinical psychologist and a writer, with millions of followers, who has been involved in discussion of free speech, gender, and the effects of cultural Marxism. His ascension to stardom was prompted by his public stand against a Canadian bill that seeks to bully people into changing their language by using pronouns of a gender they do not belong to. This early antagonism set him up for the position of an anti-progressive progressive, as it were. In his controversial tweet, Peterson stated, "Remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician?" It was this simple statement which garnered almost immediate leakage and protest of sorts. They blocked him completely on Twitter for violating the facility's policy against harassing and bigotry. Peterson nonetheless stood his ground, asserting that he would rather die than delete the tweet.
The suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that.
The crux of the controversy centers on several sensitive issues: pride, non-binary, dead naming, and gender reassignment surgeries. All of these topics are some of the most contentious within contemporary society. First, let's examine the broader context of pride. Historically, pride has been considered one of the 7 deadly sins in Christian theology, representing arrogance and an inflated sense of self-worth. Peterson's tweet invokes this idea, reflecting on how the concept of pride has evolved in contemporary society, especially with the advent of Pride Month, which celebrates LGBTQ+ identities. His provocative statement, "Remember when pride was a sin," was designed to challenge the cultural shift that has transformed pride from a vice into a celebrated virtue. Next, Peterson's use of Elliot Page's former name, Ellen, is a practice known as dead naming. In modern discourse, dead naming is seen as highly disrespectful, as it denies the legitimacy of an individual's gender identity and transition. For many, this act is not merely about language, but about acknowledging someone's identity and journey. Peterson, however, deliberately chose to use Page's former name as a form of protest against what he views as forced cultural and linguistic changes. His critics argue that this act was needlessly provocative and harmful, while his supporters see it as a defense of free speech. Peterson's tweet also included a reference to Page's surgeon, whom he called a criminal physician for performing gender transition surgery. This comment further inflamed the situation, drawing attention to the ethical debate surrounding medical practices for transgender individuals. Peterson equated gender transition surgeries with unethical medical practices of the past, suggesting that such procedures are harmful rather than beneficial. This stance, combined with his broader critique of woke culture, aligned him with those who question the growing acceptance of gender-affirming surgeries, particularly for younger individuals. However, for many in the LGBTQ+ community, such surgeries are seen as life-saving and essential for aligning one's physical appearance with their gender identity. The juxtaposition of these perspectives underscores the deep divide between traditional views on gender and the more progressive, inclusive ideologies that have gained traction in recent years. Peterson's tweet triggered Twitter's algorithm and got his account suspended within a few hours for violating Twitter policies against violence and harassment based on identity, such as gender and sexual orientation. Twitter states that Peterson violated their rules on conduct that advocate, threaten, or harass other people based on their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other characteristics. Peterson, however, was as quick to defend the tweet as an affair of free speech and not harassment or violence. As far as he is concerned, Twitter banned him as part of the woke phenomenon, a hyper-regulatory authoritative movement against the user's freedom of speech in the online platform. This event does not exist in isolation, but is an ongoing phenomenon in intercultural conflict between those who support equal language and cultural policy or policies that hinder discrimination and prejudice against minorities and multicultural societies, on the one hand, and the groups or individuals who experience such policies as a violation of their rights and freedoms. For Peterson and his followers, perhaps, such a suspension only confirms their opinion about how platforms such as Twitter try to silence the opposition. They claim that social media manufacturers have turned into sounding boards for the progressive causes, suppressing those who are against the dominant culture. To them, Peterson's failure to remove the tweeter is a gesture of the fight against recurrence of what they deem woke moralists seeking to dictate the populace. Peterson has always been an opponent of woke culture, and this new case just further proves that. His critiques are based more on the downside of thinking in simple ideological frameworks that such movements risk forming an authoritarian regime. It is no longer about gender or identity politics for Peterson. It is about free speech and forced conformity across the societal population. Peterson's appeal lies in his ability to cut through the noise and get to the heart of complex issues, whether it's about personal responsibility, meaning, or the dangers of rigid ideologies. In this regard, Peterson did not bow to delete his tweet, and his action is not an individual rebellion. It is part of his larger fight against what he perceives as liberal leftism becoming intolerant of protests and more vociferous in demanding conformity. To his fans, he is a brave man who has refused to be caught by the wave of the new woke society, and to his foes, he is the man who is bound by toxic and destructive masculinity. The temporary ban from the social media platform has to do far more than the psychologist's tweet. It's partly due to the growing polarization of the culture war regarding gender, identity, and the freedom of speech. As debates over woke culture intensify, the question remains, how much liberty are people willing to lose for the sake of development? And where is the best line to be drawn? Where next year, this year, and the year to come, the oppressed minority is recognized and protected, yet the freedom of speech prevails? In a world increasingly polarized by ideological battles, Peterson's stand against what he calls woke moralists serves as a reminder that these debates are far from over. They go on to determine the methods we use in communication, administration, and even the standards by which our society is measured. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe.